Campaign or long encounter ideas for Dungeons & Dragons should always involve deserts. Not always, but if you choose to use deserts, there's some really cool stuff. Some of them are tropes that you should absolutely be using in Dungeons & Dragons. Let's talk about those. A long-lost kingdom buried under the sand. Deserts form over thousands of years, but in Dungeons & Dragons, magic happens. So imagine a magical kingdom, or a kingdom, that was up against the mountains, basically, and all of a sudden, an area in front of the mountains dried out. And without the water, all of the salt and all the sediment began to blow against the kingdom, covering an entire kingdom in sand, being lost for centuries. Now, the edge of that kingdom has been found. This can give you an entire place for adventurers to go and adventure, uncovering a lost kingdom that's been buried now for hundreds of years. So give it a shot. It's a great way to have offshoots, one-shots, or even a campaign where that lost kingdom has magical items that the kingdom now wants to have. And you're just another adventuring party sent in to uncover things that were once thought to be myths and legends in scrolls. Imagine an oasis in the middle of the desert where only a specific magical flower grows. And that magical flower spreads enough magic for magical creatures to exist around. Magical creatures flock to this oasis. Your job is to go fix and find that magical flower and pluck it. What do you think happens to you? What do you run into? The idea that there's a magical oasis where anything can exist. It could be magical creatures, a magical insect, something that people are desired, that need, that want, and you're being sent to it. The entire campaign could exist around this one MacGuffin where you're trying to find the oasis, exploring a vast open desert, looking for that singular oasis. Does the oasis exist, or does it exist in a demi-plane where you find a portal that teleports you to another place in another realm which is surrounded by desert? And the reason this place is the desert is because of that opening of that portal. So many different things you can do with that. A desert has been dry for decades, maybe even a millennia. And all of a sudden, a storm washes through, washing water all over the desert. A storm that hasn't come in centuries. In Dungeons & Dragons, this leads to some pretty cool stuff. Imagine magical life being underneath that sand, entire ecosystems sprouting up inside that desert. And without additional water, it starts to die. Or maybe a life shows up that comes around that threatens everyone. The water washes over the desert. The desert was created by mages, by people to stop an ancient evil from spreading. All it needs is a little bit of water, and a swarm spreads like wildfire across the world. I like the idea of a storm bringing life to a desert in Dungeons & Dragons. Pockets and oases where water pooled, and now these seasonal storms are bringing more and more life. What would you do with that? How would you work that in to an overall campaign setting? That would make for some amazing things. Or even maybe that water that's washing away and bringing that is uncovering ancient buildings that are now being exposed, along with life that has long been forgotten. I like that concept because you see it in our own world where storms come through and bring life to once desolate areas. Add some magic to that, add a lost kingdom to that, and you have the makings of a campaign. A desert that's long been since dry, that's flat, arid, and cracking. All of a sudden, a river sprouts from and comes rolling through a village. A village that's on the edge of the desert sees water coming from the desert. A portal to the elemental plane of water has opened up and is spilling water into the prime material plane, into a desert, creating life where life didn't used to exist. I like combining the desert with the elemental plane of water. Two completely polar opposite places, polar opposite things actually now brought together. So you have this desolate area, and now this life-giving water comes flowing through. Well, what if the elemental plane of earth was the one that created this desert, pushing the elemental plane of water out? Now they're at conflicts. Is it an elemental battle? Is it a life versus death battle? Is it simply chaos ensues? Or does something new sprout from it? I love the idea of a lost, forgotten realm, kind of combining some of the first things we talk about with something that's new, that sprouts from it. You can combine so many things with deserts as they're so vast and so varied, from flat terrain to cracking terrain to desert dunes to cracking cliffs. All of those things make a difference. Now, add a sprout of elemental water in the middle of it and flowing rivers coming out, and you have yourself a real campaign. For those of you that want a Dungeons & Dragons game based upon the deserts, and you want to go to a trope that's been done a couple of times in movies, The desert is a flat desert surrounded by dunes on either side. And basically, the locals there use that flat terrain to travel vastly and quickly across that desert using winged vehicles or sailed vehicles and wheels to move their goods across the desert quickly because the desert's dangerous. It's flat, it's arid. But if you're caught in a storm and water hits the ground, tentacled or winged or chitinous monsters rise from the dirt searching for prey because when the water comes, so does their food. That water only comes once in a blue moon, but it can spring up on you. Magical storms are known to appear over the desert in isolated areas, causing these tentacled creatures to writhe and wriggle out, basically killing anything that's above them and eating them, and then going in for a nice nap underneath the sand or the cracked ground once again. I like the idea where if you're traveling across foot, you could be caught in one of these storms. And if you're caught in the storms, finding solid ground is going to be important. Otherwise, you're going to be surrounded by monsters. The same thing goes for, the well-sailed, wheeled, fast scooters or whatever you want to do vehicles they use to cross the land. The reason they use that is because rain happens across the desert and seeps quickly into the land. And being caught more than a day in, and you risk your life. This concept shows up in a couple of movies and I've always loved. Deserts are an amazing thing to use as a campaign backdrop setting, at the edge of your campaign, as the core, as the focus of the campaign. All of those things make a huge difference that I absolutely love, and I encourage you to try. Use the deserts, use the sand, use the dryness, use the addition of water, use all of the things and all of the tropes you've seen, because even if you use them and tweak them slightly, it'll be something new that most likely your players haven't seen before, because we don't see deserts in Dungeons & Dragons very often, unless you play Dark Sun. And that's a really good resource, and I didn't even look at that for making this video, so something to keep in mind. Also, I'm a big fan of Mad Max. Little Mad Max, little D&D, I'm a happy guy. So guys, as always, thank you so much for joining us. I hope we inspired a little bit of creativity. Sorry about the sporadicness of the last couple of videos. They've been fun to make, but trying to do a little bit more creative, flow, and it's working and it's not working, and we'll get it down. But as always, we thank you for watching. Like, subscribe, comment below, tell us what you'd like to see next, and we'll see you next time.